riding in the dirt. In the beginning, it was a necessity. The roads that we take for granted today didn't exist when the first BMW motorcycles were developed. Today, finding good roads isn't a problem, and the machines we build are better equipped than ever to take advantage of them. But some of our most loyal customers continue to ride in the dirt, and our best-selling motorcycle ever is a bike designed to be as capable off the road as it is on the road. 2010 marks the 30-year anniversary of the BMW GS motorcycle. For 3 decades, this legendary machine has been crossing borders and shattering the boundaries of what a motorcycle can be. But what makes the GS unique, and why has it become the icon of adventure riding? BMW engines were first tested by legendary fighter pilots like Baron Manfred von Richthofen, the infamous Red Baron, over the skies of Europe in the early 1900s. Renamed the Bavarian Motor Works on July 21, 1917, BMW's origins began with the Rapp Motor Works, an airplane engine company established in Munich. After World War I, the Treaty of Versailles effectively ended Germany's aero engineering programs, and the BMW engineers began focusing on small engines for motorcycles. At the helm of the company's engine design group was a young Austrian Air Force officer named Max Fritz. Originally responsible for aircraft engines like the BMW 3A, Fritz turned his attention to motorcycles. The bikes developed were used and tested on the soil in which they were created, the Bavarian Alps, a rugged environment with unpredictable weather and tightly winding roads.
You start in the sunshine, you can get into the rain, into snow, into hail. You get standard good road, you can get on gravel roads, and this is the normal motorcycle rider life.
Everything is offered there, from types of surfaces that you have, types of weather that you have, and this is basically a neat place to test bikes.
September 28, 1923, the day BMW changed the motorcycle industry forever. At the Berlin Automobile Show, BMW unveiled its first fully manufactured motorcycle, the now iconic R32.
1923, the first motorcycle with a transverse-mounted engine and shaft drive, the BMW R32.
BMW's flat twin engine was revolutionary. To overcome the heat problems suffered by the rear cylinder in a typical horizontally opposed configuration, designer Max Fritz rotated his engine 90 degrees, placing it at a right angle to the direction of travel. He then mounted the gearbox directly to the engine. This enabled him to run a shaft to a bevel drive at the rear wheel instead of using a chain drive. The bevel design had also proven itself on airplane engines, and Fritz took full advantage of its inherent reliability, lower vibrations, and reduced maintenance requirements. The boxer engine used on today's most powerful GS motorcycle is a direct descendant of the engine used on the R32 motorcycle of 1923.
At that time, our machines attained something like the perfect design. It was with these models that BMW established the reputation of the blue and white badge. Very soon, BMW motorcycles were to dominate racetracks around the world. In sporting competitions, they were among the front runners from the very start.
BMW's second bike was a racing machine, the R37, designed by engineer Rudolf Schleicher. In 1926, Schleicher became the first German to win gold on British soil when he brought the R37 to the 6 Days Enduro in England. BMW's most respected racers at the time were equally at home on the track or in the dirt, with Ernst Henne being the archetypal all-around rider. Whether in the mud or through the water, no challenge was too great for BMW's early riders.
What was perhaps different in those days when it came to people like Ernst Henne was their wide-ranging talent. Ernst Henne not only claimed world speed records, he also competed in off-road racing, circuit racing and ice racing, and was therefore much more of an all-round talent than perhaps today's idols can aspire to be.
BMW has always used racing as a platform to push the limits of performance and competition as a testing ground for new technologies. The telescopic front suspension was one of the company's most enduring early innovations, and it remained in use on all of BMW's production motorcycles until 1993, when the new telelever suspension appeared first on a sport touring boxer, and then the new R1100 GS. In the 1940s, BMW began making motorcycles for the German military. The R71 model was such a utilitarian workhorse that the United States government asked Harley-Davidson to build a model like the BMW, and the Russian motorcycle manufacturer Ural makes a similar model to this day. The ultimate sidecar machine was the R75, a 925-pound monster that featured 9 gears and could ride over almost any terrain while carrying 2 people and a machine gun. It was the king tiger of the motorcycle battlefield. When Germany was invited back to the 6 Days Enduro in 1951, BMW continued to make improvements to their off-road motorcycles. This time, the bikes were increasingly different from the production models, with larger front wheels, raised exhaust systems, telescopic forks with gaiters, protective oil pan covers, and crash bars. Compared to the lighter 2-stroke machines of the day, the heavy BMW models were seen as relics from the past. In 1963, a new frame and suspension was unveiled, which resulted in a shorter wheelbase and improved ground clearance. The new bike won the German Off-Road Championship in 1964 and 1965. These technological developments led BMW by the end of the decade to release a new model range, the Slash 5, which marked the beginning of BMW's modern era. Throughout the 1970s, BMW continued to be very successful in the dirt, which led to the development of new off-road designs. At the time, small single-cylinder 2-stroke Honda and Yamaha bikes were creating an enduro craze in the USA, but BMW envisioned a new machine with a 4-stroke engine and a suspension that was capable of riding over long distances without strain. And so the idea of the large, comfortable endurance bike was born. In 1978, the Italian company Laverda developed a prototype for BMW. It was known as the GS 800. The same year, BMW's test department built a prototype for cross-country motorsports events. It was created without formal BMW approval and featured a single-sided swing arm known as a monolever. The following year, a team of 6 BMW factory riders competed in several major off-road events. They were riding a GS 800 prototype with better suspension, a lighter frame, and an 800cc motor assembled from various BMW parts. The next year, BMW sent 2 factory teams to the major races and won several titles with the GS 800. With these victories fresh in mind, on January 1, 1979, a new management team at BMW was presented with the GS 800 prototype as the basis for a new production model. It combined components from the R80 road model with newly developed elements. A lighter rear end and larger front wheels formed the basis of its off-road credentials. But the most outstanding innovation was a single swing arm on the rear wheel. The concept was approved, and the development of the GS went into high gear. Initial tests of the new GS were performed in Ecuador in January 1980. During the trip, the motorcycles and riders had to prove themselves in extreme climatic conditions. By that fall, just 21 months after the initial approval of the concept, BMW's first production Enduro was ready to be released to the public. Introduced to the world on September 1, 1980, The R80 GS was a groundbreaking machine. It featured a powerful and refined two-cylinder boxer engine with a generous 800cc displacement and enough space to carry 2 people with luggage. The single-sided swing arm was a first on any production enduro. It was the largest, the fastest, and the lightest bike in the enduro class. BMW's press release called it the most convincing 2-in-1 motorcycle to date, noting that it was built as the ultimate leisure time instrument for every situation. Moto Rod called it the best street motorcycle BMW ever built. The archetypal adventure motorcycle, the BMW R80 GS, was eminently suited for long-distance travel under a variety of conditions. While the press was generally convinced about the bike's off-road capabilities, others were eager to see how it would perform in a real race. They got their chance when BMW entered the infamous Paris-Dakar rally.
In a race where most bikes don't even finish, BMW's reliability and performance set the bar in 1981. The company not only had the highest percentage of finishing motorcycles, but in the hands of Hubert Auriol, also won first place by a full 3 hours with the BMW R80 GS.
After the Paris-Dakar, there was no doubt that the GS was as capable off the road as it was on the road. With its 800cc engine, drive shaft, and single swinging arm, the R80 GS quickly became the ideal motorcycle for global vagabonding, and it opened up a new, previously untapped market, adventure touring.
Motorcycle adventure touring were probably born with the motorcycles. You know, it's about exploring new territories, heading out in one direction and see where you come, and with a bike, the road doesn't need to be perfect.
In 1982, Helge Petersen left his home in Norway and rode into the history books. His two-wheeled companion was an R80 GS named Olga.
I think it first hit me that I was on a journey when I arrived in Africa. Now I know I had left the known behind me, and ahead of me it was just the unknown.
What started out as a dream to see Africa turned into a 10-year odyssey around the world through more than 80 countries. Along the way, Helge Petersen became the first motorcyclist to ride the length of the Pan American Highway through the infamous Darien Gap.
The Pan American Highway have a missing link of 80 miles, and I chose to take the bike through it. I thought it was going to be easier. We were following Indian tracks. I had 40 yards of rope and pulleys, and to get through I had to pull them up the hills and down deep, steep embankments of the rivers. I fell over with my motorcycle. I broke my wrist, or my bone in the wrist here. Later I broke my rib. It took us 20 days to go those 80 miles. Probably the hardest I ever done in my life.
When his journey ended in 1992, the R80 GS that had taken him around the world found a home at the BMW Museum in Munich, and Helge Petersen rode away on a new BMW R1100 GS. After Helge Petersen conquered Africa, it was Gaston Raillet's turn.
At first, there's a discernible racetrack, but it soon disappears. Gaston Raillet steers the BMW R80 GS at an unbelievable speed, and it runs reliably like clockwork. Yesterday we had 745 miles, and it is tough through the sand, a tough race, especially after we've done some 3,100 miles, and this day was very, very difficult. Raillet, only 5'4" tall, is nicknamed Tom Thumb and has to literally mount the BMW R80 GS. However, he handles the bike brilliantly. he is totally focused. He has to make up time. And what might be perceived as child's play is, in fact, riding expertise at its best. Alone and without teammates, but with an undeniable fighting spirit, Gaston Raillet lays down an unbelievable speed through the Tenere Desert, to the extent that many of his competitors cannot keep up. With the cheering of several thousands on the beach in Dakar and a lead of over 50 minutes, the king of the desert, Gaston Raillet, races towards the finish line. It was the second time that the 34-year-old Belgian Raillet won the Paris-Dakar rally on a BMW. And it was the fourth win of this gigantic race for BMW, with Gaston Raillet exclaiming at the finish line, "This was the toughest race of my life, but I am happy."
The success of the GS and the world's toughest rally paved the way for the boxer's career as a dependable means of transport for globetrotters. BMW naturally followed their victory with the Paris-Dakar Special Edition model in 1984, which further enhanced the bike's growing reputation as the motorcycle of choice for long-distance travel. By 1987, more than 24,000 GS motorcycles were produced, and the next generation of the BMW GS was on its way. Now written without a forward slash, the new GS featured a paralever rear swing arm in place of the monolever, a new front suspension, cross-spoke wheels, and frame improvements. A 980cc engine represented the top of the line in the R100 GS. The 1988 Paris-Dakar kit was designed for the long-distance traveler and featured better weather protection and adaptable luggage solutions. For the first time, a red tubular frame ran outside of the fairing, and an aluminum engine guard plate was bolted under the oil pan. It also featured cylinder guards, hand protectors, and a mud guard. It became Germany's best-selling motorcycle in 1988. By now, the GS was a mature world-traveling bike, and it had evolved considerably. But the evolution wasn't about to stop. Throughout the 90s, BMW continued to evolve the GS motorcycle, releasing a redesigned 4-valve boxer with a telelever suspension in 1993, and a sportier and more aggressive 1150 by the end of the decade. The last of the 2-valve boxers rolled off the production line in December of 1996. In 1993, BMW returned a single-cylinder model to the market with the F650 Enduro. Although BMW had produced single-cylinder bikes before, this was the first BMW ever produced with a chain drive. Although it was initially perceived as a somewhat less capable version of the larger GS, all of that changed when the bike was used in the 1999 Paris-Dakar Challenge. The modified BMW 650RR won the race 2 years in a row. Not only that, but BMW swept first through fourth place in the 2000 race. Experience and knowledge gained at the Paris-Dakar Rally eventually led to the engineering concepts used on the F650 GS Dakar and the new R1200 GS. Although BMW had pulled out of competitive racing after their win at the Paris-Dakar, the world of adventure touring was booming. More and more riders were expanding their horizons and exploring ever-distant lands on their GS motorcycles.
Motorcycle adventure touring have changed tremendously, and more people are doing it today. You go on the internet and Google motorcycle adventure GS riding, you get tons of web pages dedicated to it, people that's sending reports all the time. I can see the BMW bikes too, they've changed with that and gotten better and better all the time.
BMW answered the demand by continuing to improve their GS motorcycles throughout the decade, releasing a completely updated version of the GS in 2004. In fact, the R1200 GS is the most successful motorcycle in BMW Motorrad's history, proving that the GS has indeed withstood the test of time.
When I first got my R80 GS in 1981, I thought it can't get better than this. Well, it got better. It got more beefier, more horsepower, stronger forks, better suspension. And now here we are with fuel injection, and I can sit with the press of a button to change my suspension. It's incredible. And most of the changes, though, that I mostly enjoy, it's not just the horsepower, it's how it handles. And the proof has been up through the years. You've seen it over and over again. Editors in magazines around the world are praising the GS.
In 2005, BMW introduced a competition-worthy production boxer, the HP2. Designed with harder-edged off-road use in mind, the HP2 weighs in at just 175 kilograms and comes with a 1200cc boxer engine that's good for 105 horsepower. The HP2 is the most uncompromising production off-road boxer of all time, and BMW is once again at the forefront of off-road events. In 2009, the range was expanded with the introduction of the F800 GS middleweight sports enduro, which is also destined to become one of BMW Motorrad's best-selling machines. Riding in the dirt, it's been in our blood since the beginning. Almost 60 years of off-road experience went into the first GS motorcycle, and another 30 years of further development have brought us the GS motorcycles of today.
When the R80 GS first came out in 1980, 30 years ago, I saw it and I thought it was the coolest ever. But I also thought, when is the competition going to kick in here? When are they going to come up and at least meet what the BMW GS is doing? But for some reason, nobody been able to match what BMW is making. So it's going to be very curious to see how this is going to carry on into the future, and if we look back in 10, 15, 20 years, how that legacy is carrying on.
People buy a GS motorcycle for lots of different reasons, but riders of BMW Motorrad's legendary Enduro all share a common desire to travel further off the beaten track and to experience more unusual and interesting places than ordinary riders. When it comes to long distance, rough terrain, and serious adventure travel, no other motorcycle comes close to matching the ability of the all-conquering BMW GS.